Okay, and you say cancel here, and you're recording. So let me.
You have to. Oh, you cancel. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. Good Erev Shabbos. Today's class is sponsored by Elaine Pomerantz in memory of her father, who has Yortzeit currently, Shabsai Meir ben Avraham, Zechona Lebrocha. And Shoma should have an aliyah, and we appreciate Elaine's help. This week's Parsha contains the long Tochacha, the prediction of the evils that would befall the Jewish people in their exile. To us, it reads as history, not as prophecy, because every word that is included there came to pass. We can see the Tochacha on film, so to speak. All of the unspeakable atrocities that Moshe describes occurred. So that's 75 years, 80 years ago. But in the history of the Jewish people, there have been many Tochachas, many incidents of terrible events that befall the Jewish people. In the Ashkenazic world, there was the Gzeros of Tach V'Tat, 1648 and 1649, where the Ukrainian nationalist Khmelnytsky organized a massive pogrom that it's estimated that 200,000 Jews were killed. 200,000 Jews may be small change in terms of the Holocaust of the 20th century, but in the 17th century, that was a major, was almost 10% of the Jewish population. And before that, what happened to the exile from Spain and what happened to the exiles themselves, we have it all recorded in the Gzeres Tach V'Tat, 1648, 1649. We have a book written by an eyewitness called Yeveina Metzula, in which he describes what went on. And in the exile from Spain, we have books written by the exiles and the survivors, all of which raise a number of questions. That's why this is such a difficult parsha to deal with. On one hand, the parsha is full of hope. You're coming to Eretz Israel, you'll bring bikurim, you'll give meiser, their Bona Shalom will bless you. And then all of a sudden, Moshe, like he drops a bomb on them. And you have over 90 psukim that are frightening even to read or to hear. So what the Meforshim always searched to try and answer a number of questions. which I don't know if they can ever be answered. But at least there are certain insights. One is, why does Moshe bother to tell us what's going to happen? We have a rule that when Moshe asked the Ribono Shel Olam, what name should I tell the Jewish people? On whose behalf am I arriving? So Kaviyachol, heaven answered, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. So the Rashi points out, quoting the Medrash, Ehyeh imam b'tzora zu, I will be with them in this trouble in Egypt. Asher Ehyeh, I will be with them in later troubles as well. So Moshe's response was, I don't want that name. Dayo letzora b'shato. The troubles will come, so it's enough that they come in their proper time. I don't have to anticipate them. I don't have to tell them now that there's going to be troubles later. And we see that the comment of Moshe was accepted because it says, Kol somar Ehyeh shlachani aleich. Only Ehyeh, not Asher Ehyeh. Because why should we talk about troubles in the future? And that's true in life generally. We all know our mortality. We all know troubles. But Dayo letzora b'shato, right? They don't have to anticipate it. Don't have to deal with it now. Famous phrase of the Even Ezra, that the past is gone, the future has not yet arrived, and the present is only the wink of an eye. So just live life the way it is. Our nature is to live life in the future. We always are anticipating our future, and therefore we are more than willing to make sacrifices in our present situation, so to speak, in order to guarantee a better future. Sometimes that is effective, and sometimes it is not at all. But we all understand that feeling. But why should why should Moshe anticipate and describe in such detail a very, very bleak future that contains all of this cruelty and violence and tragedy? It's enough, Yirmiyahu will come and write Eicha. Not necessary to predict it for us. So that's one issue. Second issue, and again, I'm not saying that I have any answers to these issues. And in fact, I think that these issues remain without answers. The Gemara many times concludes a discussion on a certain halacha, and the Gemara says, Kasha, that's a good question. And the Gemara goes on. So that's part of the Jewish mindset, to be able to live with a kasha, be able to live with an unanswered question. And the unanswered question is of such weight and importance that it bothers us. But we have to admit that our ability to somehow provide a good answer is very, very limited, if at all. So why does Moshe do this? So one idea that's mentioned is because in the midst of it, Moshe reassures the Jewish people. And even though all of this will happen, and they will be captives in the lands of their enemies. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, Lo ga'altim, they are not repugnant to me, Lo ma'astim, I have not rejected them. And I will fulfill my end of the covenant. They will survive it all. So Moshe wants to impress upon the Jewish people the power of the covenant. The power of the covenant is even when these things happen, all of these unspeakable things that would destroy any nation. We're not the only people in the world to suffer a Holocaust. But other nations never recover from it. They are destroyed by it. And the prime example in our time is the Armenians. The Turks destroyed 1.5 million Armenians in the First World War. They drove them out, men, women, and children, into the Syrian desert and left them there to die, which they did. And to compound it till today, Turkey doesn't even admit that it happens, that it ever happened. But one thing's for sure, Armenia has never recovered. The Armenians have never recovered. Nations don't recover from Holocausts. And therefore, Moshe has to reassure the Jewish people. Even though all of this will happen to you, I remember the covenant. I will restore you. Somehow we'll rise from the ashes again. That's an insight. That's not an answer. But it's an important insight. The Shlomo Melech says in Mishlei, Sheva Yipol Tzadik Vakom. The righteous person falters and falls 7 times, but Vakom, he always arises. He always gets up. And the Meforshim all say the difference between the tzaddik and the Rasha is not in falling. The Rasha falls, the tzaddik falls. In tzaddik boretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yechta. No perfect people. So he makes a mistake. He does something that he shouldn't do. But the difference is that tzaddik is vakom. He'll get up from it again. He won't stay down. And the Rasha, once Rasha falls, very difficult to extricate it. He's always on the bottom. It becomes habitual and addictive. So Moshe wanted to point that out. There's a second idea here that bears some consideration. There's a word that appears often in the Tochacha. That word is carry, kuf resh yud. Carry is from the word, the Hebrew word Micra. Micra is that something happens. But in a broader sense, Micra means that it has nothing to do with heaven, it has nothing to do with what is fated for us. It just happens. It's a happenstance. And that's what so Moshe says, the Jewish people deal with God and with events, carry. They don't see that there's anything major involved there. It just happens. Sometimes things happen that are of such major consequences that it's hard just to say it just happened. But if a person is in a mindset that everything is Micra, everything just happens, so then Afani Elechimahem Bekeri. And God also let things happen. The Tochacha is letting things happen. If so to speak, there were if the Lord would not interfere and save us, none of us would survive any generation. You don't think the world is not ready to dispense with the problems of the Jewish people and Israel? It's always a problem, the Jewish problem. Nobody else is a problem. So if it's Micra, that's a problem. That is the problem. The problem is that you think that it's happenstance. And people look at it, historians and sociologists. So, for instance, there's a tremendous amount of literature and video, film on the rise of Nazism, what happened in Germany, etc., in the 1920s and 1930s. And it all comes to explain why. But no matter how we consider it, it doesn't explain why. It explains how. Why it happened. Why the most civilized country in Europe could behave in such a barbaric fashion and allow a madman to run it and destroy it. But that remains unanswered. But we say that's what happened, right? So we write biographies and histories, but it's all Micra. It's all carried. And therefore, if to us, that's how we looked at it, so then the Rebbeinu Shalom allows all of these historical forces to play out without interference. And when that happens, then we are always doomed. We see that Moshe already said that to Paro. When he was talking to Paro, he said, Hashem Elokeinu Nikre Aleinu, with a hey. When he first spoke to Paro, so he spoke to Paro in terms that Paro would understand. So he's not going to give him a long lecture on how heaven guides things. Says Hashem Elokeinu Ivrim, God, the God of the Hebrews. He doesn't even want to start up the question of a universal God with him. Micra Aleinu, it happened that happenstance that he spoke to us and he said that we should come and tell you to set the Jewish people free. Paro says, who, what, where? He's not on the list. I got a list of all the gods, and he's not on the list. So what are you talking about? So the next time that Moshe speaks to him, it says Hashem Micra Aleinu, with an aleph, not with a hey. God is called on to us. This is not a happenstance, Paro. This is a direct conversation with you. So the change from Micra to Nikra with an aleph is fundamental to understanding what happened here. But it's not only fundamental for Paro, it's fundamental for the Jewish people. All of the time that the Jewish people complain and say we want to go back to Egypt, or in Egypt they say, Chadal mimenu, stop talking to us, Benavdo es Mitzrayim, and we'll remain servants to the Egyptians. It's all because they think that it is somehow a happenstance, right? It's a situation, you can't change it. And Moshe tries to elevate them. The whole process of the 10 plagues is seen not so much as a punishment for the Egyptians as a means of elevating the Jewish people to realize that we're dealing here with God taking a direct act, so to speak, in human events in history. So the Tochacha is scary. Why did it happen? Because that's how we treat things. We think everything is natural forces. We don't see Hashgocha. If you don't see it, and you don't appreciate it, and you don't believe in it, so then I'm going to let you experience natural forces. And the experience of natural forces, when it comes to dealing with us, is always disastrous. So that's a very important element in our time as well, how we see ourselves, how we see Eretz Yisrael, the state of Israel, how we see the Jewish people. And I've remarked often that those who wanted to lose their Jewishness always say, K'chol hagoyim beis Yisrael. We're not special. We're just like everybody else. You're just like everybody else, so then you're going to be, you'll see. Shlomo Carlebach used to say, he attended many campuses in his day and dealt with the students. So he always would say that if a student came up to him and said, you know, I'm a Catholic, so he said, okay, he believed that he was a Catholic. And if he came up and he said, you know, I'm a Lutheran, so he believed he was a Lutheran. Or he said, I'm a Muslim, he believed he's a Muslim. But if somebody came up and said, I'm a human being, he said, that's a Jew. Because the opposite of being a Jew is to say that you're not special. The whole basis of Judaism is Ata b'chartona mikol ha'amin. V'mamtona mikol ha'shon. Ki yashtona b'mitzvosecha. That's the whole basis. That's Judaism 101. If you don't believe that, if you're not willing to operate on that premise, so then v'alachta imi bikeri, you go with me with this concept of happenstance, naturalness, historical forces, Karl Marx, etc. Because how heaven treats us is a reflection of how we treat others and how we treat heaven. An absolute reflection of that. And if we go Bikeri, so then the nations of the world, in their natural enmity, are capable of doing terrible things. And we have all of the story of the Jewish people to back up this idea and to show how relevant and important it is. And that is really part of what should be a proper Jewish education. Proper Jewish education is to teach the child or the student or the adult that you are special. Most of us in a world of billions of people, so it's hard to feel special. But you are special. And that reflects itself in a myriad ways, many, many ways. It's part of the ethos of the Jewish people. So that also is a lesson from the Tochacha. The Tochacha happens because you're special and you don't want to be special. The Gemara discusses, for instance, Ma bein Shaul le David, one of the great topics in Tanakh. Why is Shaul HaMelech an unsuccessful king, so to speak, even though he is a great tzaddik? Ben Shono Shaul b'molcho. The Gemara says he was free of sin as a 1-year-old. And even though he is the great Talmud Chacham, and he's Mishichmo V'mala, physically he is an absolute challenging figure, and he's a warrior. So why does he fall? Why does the whole thing fall apart? And within 2 years. The beginning, Yechi HaMelech. And David HaMelech is a shepherd. His brothers don't have a high opinion of him. And we find that David does things that could be considered to make him a renegade. And even later in life, when he is the king, commits a moral, if not technical, sin. And yet David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayom. David is the greatest. Mashiach ben David. To heal him. And the Mefarshim say, I mean, the basic line here is that Shaul doesn't feel that he's special. He doesn't feel that he's special. He doesn't feel that he's worthy to be the king. And if you don't feel that you can aspire to those heights, then you, to a great extent, will falter. David never doubts his future. He doesn't know how it's going to happen. He doesn't know what twists and turns life will take for him. But David knows he's David. And therefore, that is his greatness. So the Tochacha comes to teach us our greatness, not just our weaknesses. From the negative part, we can understand the positive. We can understand our potential, what is really involved. And because of that, therefore, the Tochacha is very important, even though it may be jarringly disturbing to us, because of the fact that it emphasizes one of the most difficult things to contemplate regarding the Holocaust was that the Germans kept a record of every visit. Name and date, etc. Even the smallest, the Navi said, "Im koton ato beinecha, rosh shivtei Yisrael ata." You think that you think you're Mr. Saul? Rosh shivtei Yisrael ata. You can be the great king. You have to see yourself in that kind of a light. So to that extent, the Tochacha is a challenge to us, to raise us, that Shem Hashem Nikro Aleinu, with an aleph, the Rebbeinu Shalom calls upon us. And if we feel that way, then each and every one of us, in our own fashion and ability, is really able to be a unique, special person and a contributor to Klal Yisrael. So I thank you for coming, and a Shabbat Shalom. Next week is a Parshas Nitzovim, which is the final Parsha of the year. So we will still have a class here in the morning. Thank you.
Do you think punishment, whether to a person or to a nation, makes them better?
No. Rarely.
Rarely. So that's not really the answer.
That's not the answer.